Welcome to Mass Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for coming by. Let me start with a link to an Al Jazeera inside story with Laura Kyle. The question being posed was, is Africa getting into a debt trap with China? China is Africa's largest trading partner and has already spent tens of billions of dollars in investments and loans, with the promise of much more to come: roads, railways, ports, and the Chinese government is backing large-scale projects across Africa as part of its so-called Belt and Road Initiative. Leaders of more than 50 African countries have been in Beijing for a two-day summit. China's President Xi Jinping offered $60 billion in new financing deals, but what are the long-term financial risks? Laura Kyle, Dan Wang, an economist from the intelligence unit, an analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit, Lassan Haddad, Morocco's former tourism minister and MP, and myself. And do have a listen, because I thought we covered quite a lot of ground, in point of fact, and I think there is an important recalibration by President Xi Jinping, and I'll come to that because I actually read his speech verbatim, but do have a listen. And then I also participated in a German TV interview about the same matter. Macro thoughts, I was quoted in Sputnik about whether the US was weaponizing the dollar, and that's what I said it's done, and I said Turkey will not be the last to be targeted. Sputnik spoke to myself, and I said that the US has been weaponizing the dollar. On Sunday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan described the US as behaving like wild wolves, and said Ankara would pursue non-dollar trade transactions with Russia and other countries in a bid to bypass the dollar's global dominance. The lira, as you know, has plunged after the US targeted the Turkish currency as part of a row over a US pastor, Andrew Brunson, who was arrested in October 2016 over aiding an organization led by the Islamic preacher Fethullah Gulen, who Ankara believes was behind the attempted coup in July. That year, Gulen is of course living in exile in the US. I said the dollar is a weapon and Trump is relishing his financial warfare strategies. We have exited a period when the living was easy and the world was awash with a golden flood of dollar liquidity. Many policymakers imbibed the Kool-Aid and believed in this new normal. Now we're reverting back to the status quo ante. The tide has now reversed. President Erdogan's voodoo economics worked in the time of the golden flood of liquidity, but under today's less benign conditions, no one except die-hard Erdogan-supporting Turkish nationalists is prepared to throw good money after money gone bad on the basis of Erdogan's hocus-pocus monetary policy. I said I'm not sure if the weaponization was by design or by accident, but what is crystal clear is currencies like the Turkish lira, which has fallen 42.5% year to date, are the equivalent of offering you an opportunity to pick up pennies in front of a freight train, that being the dollar. I've listened to many folks rail against the dollar's hegemony and for eternity. Gaddafi and Saddam spring to mind, and both ended up dead. It is not possible for Erdogan to bend the arc of monetary policy making to his will. And if he continues down this path, the Turkish economy will continue to crater. And we can see very clearly where cratering economies end, like Venezuela and Argentina. I also said he's a mercurial politician, but he reminds me of a man walking around a tinderbox with a match in his hand. He's endangering himself and his legacy is in peril. I said Trump's aggressive foreign economic policy is the signature success of this administration. It is highly effective Look at Venezuela to see its most extreme output. Iran is in a similar bind. China is in retreat, notwithstanding some bravuro talk. Trump can keep it up, it's working a treat, I said. I also said the only politician who had managed to stave off a currency attack from the dollar was Malaysia's Mahathir Mohamad. For the foreseeable future, I do not see gold, the Chinese renminbi, or crypto replacing the dollar. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes. And then I was asked who could be the next target, and I said, South Africa, beware. South Africa strikes me an example of a country that should be worried, very worried, and I was hinting at Trump's recent tweets which have come out in support of white farmers who claimed they've had their farms seized and been subjected to mass killings. I wrote about this on the 20th of August, currency puzzles and a weaponized dollar. I said on the 13th of August, Trump seems to be relishing his financial warfare strategies. And on the 13th of August, I went back to Hunter S. Thompson, The Edge. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Home thoughts, I returned to Salman Rushdie. Ours is the most cryptic of centuries. Its true nature, a dark secret. Space is amazing, but there is something extra amazing about a picture of our home planet, especially one starring the moon. Italian astronaut Paolo Nespoli snapped this stunning image from the International Space Station last September. This is a view of Lothagam North Pillar Kenya, built by East Africa's earliest herders around 5,000 years ago, CNN. Now the region is the site of a discovery that has the potential to change how the world views ancient societies and the way they operated. A team of researchers from Stony Brook University and the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History have discovered a massive, elaborate cemetery in the region that is the largest and oldest in Eastern Africa. Here temperatures can rise to 40 degrees Celsius, and the vast rocky landscape can look like a desert planet in the Star Trek movies. This discovery challenges earlier ideas about monumentality, said Elizabeth Sawchuk of the Department of Anthropology at Stony Brook University. Sadly, lion have killed my young Jersey bull, Halcyon, together with a second bull right outside the house. I rather miss having to shoo Halcyon out of the living room where he sought refuge on hot days, where eating what's left of him. I said, I'm terribly sorry to hear about the loss of Halcyon. Rather curiously, one of my articles predicting the sell-off we are now witnessing was called Halcyon, the end of Halcyon days. From the Latin Alcyone, daughter of Iulius and the wife of Ceos. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into halcyon birds, kingfishers. When Alcyone made her nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Iulius restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year so she could lay her eggs. These became known as the Halcyon days, when storms do not occur. Today, the term is used to denote a past period that is being remembered for being happy and or successful. Then I came across this tweet from the TSLE bot. Display me Iulius above, reviewing the insurgent gales which tangle Ariadne's hair and swell with haste the perjured sails. And from that T.S. Eliot I went to this T.S. Eliot, between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. Political reflections, Chinese President Xi Jinping's keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the 2018 Beijing Summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing is linked in full on rich wrap-ups, and I'll just quote a few things that caught my attention. September has just set in Beijing, bringing with it refreshing breeze and picturesque autumn scenery. And we are so delighted to have all of you with us, friends both old and new. in this lovely season for the reunion of the China-Africa big family at the 2018 Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, he said. China-Africa friendship and cooperation have broad vistas. Only with deep roots can a tree yield rich fruit. Only filled with oil can a lamp burn brightly. We follow a 5-no approach in our relations with Africa: no interference in African countries' pursuit of development paths that fit their national conditions, no interference in African countries' internal affairs, no imposition of our will on African countries, no attachment of political strings to assistance to Africa, and no seeking of selfish political gains in investment and financing cooperation with Africa. We hope this 5-no approach could apply to other countries as they deal with matters regarding Africa. For China, we are always Africa's good friend, good partner, and good brother. No one could undermine the great unity between Chinese people and the African people. To quote a Chinese saying, the ocean is vast because it rejects no rivers. And then he mentioned 8 initiatives. China will launch an industrial promotion initiative, an infrastructure connectivity initiative, a trade facilitation initiative, a green development initiative, a capacity building initiative, a healthcare initiative, a people-to-people exchange initiative, a peace and security initiative. To make sure that these 8 initiatives are implemented on the ground, China will extend $60 billion of financing to Africa in the form of government assistance, as well as investment and financing by financial institutions and companies. This will include $15 billion of grants, interest-free loans, concessional loans, $20 billion of credit lines, setting up of a $10 billion special fund for development financing, and a $5 billion special fund for financing imports from Africa. We encourage Chinese companies to make at least $10 billion of investment in Africa in the next 3 years. In addition, for those of Africa's least developed countries, heavily indebted and poor countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing countries, important point. That's all about control in the Indian Ocean, because an island has an enormous exclusion zone. That's what he's targeting. And I spoke about that in the Al Jazeera interview, which is really about how the West is not keen on China breaking out of the South China Sea, but they already have done. The future of China-Africa relations lies in our young people. Important point and significant linguistic step change. He's fired his propaganda chief about 2 weeks ago, and you can see the language has changed. The red rising sun will light up the road ahead. I'm confident that the baton of Chinese-Africa friendship will be passed from one generation to the next, and that China and Africa working together will build an even more vibrant community with a shared future. The day will surely come when the Chinese nation realizes its dream of national renewal, and Africa realizes its dream of unity and invigoration. So as I said, and I tweeted this morning, on balance, a substantive linguistic recasting of China-Africa by Xi Jinping. The end of vanity is one example, and an awareness of the failure of trickle-down, and much more. This is a photograph of the president, and this is a photograph of the official lineup for the big China-Africa summit. That was from Tristan McConnell, who was commenting on the fact that no women. I wrote a piece over the weekend called Africa, the Bell at the Ball. Please have a read. Chinese debt has become the methamphetamines of infrastructure finance, highly addictive, readily available, and with long-term negative effects. David Pilling quoting Time. I like this quote from a mother to her activist son in the new film Kinshasa Makambo via Africa's country. When you put a snake and a rat and a falcon and a rabbit and a shark and a seal in a zoo without walls, things start getting nasty and bloody. It's a quote from Reince Priebus and via John Eglinby. International markets, in case you did miss it, the ISM Manufacturing Index rose to the highest level since 2004. Overheating is not off the table at this point in time. It's just Blockland. Tea commodity, just wow. Looking at US data, it's been strong. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 115.51. Dollar index 95.42. Japanese yen 111.44. Swissy 0.9737. The pound 128.31. The Aussie, which was up sharply in the morning, is now down 0.7157. India rupee, fresh record low 71.745. South Korean won 11.2093. The Rial 415.72. Egyptian pound 17.9143. And the big move yesterday was in the South African rand. We blew through 15. Last trading 15.3503. Dollar index, this is a chart from Tea Commodity, 95.42. Target is 100. Euro dollar, target 115.10 and then 110. This is a 3-month chart. We're currently at 115.53. Commodity markets, these have been roiled big time. Every major metal, industrial and precious metal is now down this year. Zinc is the worst, minus 27%. Nickel is the best, minus 1.4%. Brent crude came off the top yesterday. Take a look at this chart from Tea Commodity, dropped as much as 35 cents to $77.82 a barrel. So, you know, it's been an outperformer within the commodity complex. Not difficult to know why. Gold, about which I'm very bearish, 1193.50. Take a look at this chart from Tea Commodity. My target is 100. The commodity market is reflective of that song by Hotel California, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. Silver hasn't been below $14 since the depths of the 2015-2016 commodity crisis. Can the 200-day moving average save copper again? Asked Pinecone Macro. Potato prices are going crazy. Have a look at this chart. And tongue-in-cheek, Thomas says, time to switch to sugar. That works for moonshine, right? Emerging markets, Bloomberg asks, how much worse can the emerging market slump get? 20th of August, I wrote a piece about currency puzzles and a weaponized dollar, and I said then, ever since I was a little boy in shorts and Mombasa, folks have been talking about the hegemony of the dollar and how this hegemony was set to be broken into tiny little pieces. Then I was 13th of August describing the edge. There is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who've gone over. Hunter S. Thompson. That note, have a look at emerging market FX. This is a chart from Sun Chartist. That's in 2018. There's a new acronym used by international investors, BRATS. Brazil, Russia, Argentina, Turkey, South Africa. The hope that brought about BRICS has disintegrated into BRATS. Indian bonds erased gains. The yield on the 10-year rose 3 basis points to 8.09%, the highest since 2014. The rupee fell to another record low, 71.795, erasing some early gains. Shanghai Composite lost nearly 1% by the midday break today. Take you back to July when I asked about tariff wars and who blinks first. And China's growth gauges aren't moving in the same direction. This is from Fast FT. Let's move on to Africa. Just because beer is cheap, it doesn't mean you should drink. Sage words from Edward Cropley on Africa's Chinese credit habit. Just because beer is cheap, it doesn't mean you should drink. Africa for years has been drunk on cheap Chinese credit, a habit that has led to waste and even sovereign default. China is now preaching sobriety, but neither Africa's borrowers nor their lenders nor their lender are showing much appetite for restraint. China and Africa, logical partners, filling a gap left by Western commercial lenders who were too expensive, multilateral agencies who were too slow. China's government and banks have lent at least $136 billion to the continent this century, providing Africa with much needed capital, Beijing with vital natural resources. Cash has built airports, ports, railways, as we all know, from Cape Town to Cairo. President Xi seems to want change. On Monday, while pledging a further $60 billion over the next 3 years, he warned countries against vanity projects. Nor are the borrowers showing much evidence of sobriety, as it paid out the final chunk of a $918 million bailout in April. The IMF told Ghana, a modest cocoa, gold and oil producer, to rein in its borrowing. In a meeting with Xi Jinping, President Nana Akufo-Addo announced a 100-year infrastructure bond worth $50 billion. And as I said, he's popping quaaludes. So who would be the next target for the US's ire? I said South Africa, beware. I was talking about the linguistic warfare specialist Trump and the risk around this whole white farmer issue. And I wrote a piece about the Tsar getting caught in the crossfire, calling President Trump the linguistic and financial warfare specialist, has the machine gun. I was quoting that old ANC anti-Boer song about bring me my machine gun. But I was saying Trump has the machine gun, and the Tsar is in its line of fire. We've now learned South Africa unexpectedly fell into a recession. This is from J.S. Blokland. David Pilling describes it as from Ramaphoria to Ramacession. He's right. Economic activity declined by 0.7% in quarter 2 2018, Q on Q, after a 2.6% decline in Q1. The rand fell to a more than 2-year low of 15 to the dollar. This is from Paul Wallace, last time I checked, 15.35. If you misdiagnose the problem, the solution will be wrong, former President Mbeki said famously. The South African all shares down 2.71% year to date. As I said on the 27th of August when we had a 14 handle, I said traders might consider buying 1-year maturity, one touch, ZAR puts with a 17 strike. We're not that far away. I said, I think the rand is at risk of a precipitous asymmetric downside move as far as 17 to the dollar. And that's why traders might consider buying 1-year maturity, one touch ZAR puts. The rand is chewing up that crazy candlewick South Africa tried to call a fluke. That's Pinecone Macro with his chart. Egyptian pound is at 17.9143. It's been outperforming practically every other emerging market currency except the shilling. Nigeria's $8.1 billion demand casts doubt over MTN's Nigeria IPO plans. Sources: the Nigerian all shares down 8.65% this year. Accra's share market is poised for a massive boost in liquidity Wednesday when shares start trading in MTN Ghana. They sold about a third of the shares available in an IPO, offering $238 million. $238 million was raised, 3 times larger than the next biggest Ghana IPO. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 7.1% year to date. As Zambia's debt crisis worsens, Africa Confidential reports that ZESCO, the state electricity company, is considering a takeover by a Chinese company. The majority of shares in the national broadcaster ZNBC are held by China's Topstar Communications. Kachwania, who I follow on Twitter, tweeted, the biggest news of the day broke, Chinese telling Kenyan government to re-look at the commercial viability of SGR. Media houses just gloss over it or missed it. Kenyan government to re-look at the commercial viability. It seems Chinese did not agree to give Kenyan government the loan to continue with the SGR, have agreed to do a feasibility study from Mombasa to Kisumu. Simply put, even the Chinese are now telling Kenyans to reconsider if the SGR is worth wasting another 300 billion shillings on. Media is calling whatever Kenya got from China goodies. It's not goodies, they are loans which you have to pay back. Part of the reason why Kenyans are now forced to pay more through VAT introduction of the petroleum products. I fear that unless we stop digging, we will have a "don't cry for me, Argentina" moment. That's the chief economist of the Kenya Bankers Association, J.M. Osoro. Politicians in Kenya are posturing on how they are for the common man, while for the past half-decade they've been accomplices in the fiscal mess we're in. I fear that unless we stop digging, we will have a "don't cry for me, Argentina" moment. The word debt in Swahili or Kiswahili is deni. The word debts is madeni. Kenya plans to court Ryanair and EasyJet to boost beach tourism. We're developing a strategy to encourage low-cost carriers from the UK to fly here, Najib Balala said in an interview. Kenya expects visitor numbers to climb by 18% this year, boosted by improved security, infrastructure such as a new railway, and global hotel brands expanding, he said. This is a photograph of the Indian Ocean taken at 420 South, Diani Beach, Kenya. No filter. Nairobi All Share down 2.25% year to date. NSE 20 down 14.36% year to date. Nairobi is lit. Photos by Alieniki Visuals. And yesterday I was doing my interview at Al Jazeera, which is on the 9th floor in Upper Hill, and I took these 3 photographs to show you the changing landscape in real time of Upper Hill. Once again, I appreciate the fact that you take time out to listen to what I got to opine on. I'm very grateful.